Have there been particular proverbs that have been bedrocks for you?
This is the next 3 hours, basically. It's phenomenal when you get into it.
Well, hello and welcome to Reframing Education, the show exploring education with Christ at the centre. My name's Johnny Thomas.
And I'm James McKinnell. Today's episode, Wisdom in Education. We're delighted to be joined by Mr. Geoff Cresswell. Geoff, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Oh, thanks for giving up your time for this. You're a busy man. You've got over 20 years of experience as a head in the state sector. You've been an inspector at Ofsted, England, and Estin, the equivalent in Wales, since 1996. You're currently the director of Intro Teach Thrive, which focuses on mentoring school leaders in South Wales. And on top of all that, you've just finished a long stint as chair of elders in your church in Cardiff. So huge experience of developing leaders. You're very motivated to support the current and next generation of school leaders. But for those not in leadership or aiming towards school leadership, why is wisdom in leadership such a rich conversation for a whole variety of people to engage with, whether or not they're in those sorts of positions at the moment?
Oh, well, it applies to every aspect of life. Work, family, church, at every level, in national, international, local level. And in each case, the impact of wise or unwise leadership has massive implications.
So, Geoff, school leadership, church leadership, you've specialised as an inspector in leadership in your role with Estin, and you're a mentor now to a whole variety of leaders. And over the many years, you've been shaped very consciously by a particular vision of leadership, and it's the reason we've called today's episode Wisdom in Leadership. And I wonder, can you tell us about that, please?
Yes, certainly. When I was in my early 20s, I went to a conference, and the person there speaking described that he'd been on a plane journey and he'd sat next to an American businessman. And he asked this businessman what was the secret of his success. The businessman wasn't a Christian, but what he said was, well, I follow what the book of Proverbs says. And whatever those principles are, I follow those. And that's why my business is a success. Now, I can't remember what the speaker said altogether, or what his topic was even. But I remembered that, and I thought to myself, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, this is wisdom. It's a wisdom book, Proverbs. These Proverbs are written down, and they were put there for generations to look at and to follow. In fact, the start of the book of Proverbs talks about the next generation. And so I thought, well, I ought to start looking at the principles in Proverbs and seeing how they apply. And so I started then, 40 years ago, using Proverbs in my bringing up of children, very much in my classroom. I built the ethos of the classroom around the principles in Proverbs. Then, as I went into leadership, I applied them into my role as head teacher, and then across into all sorts of leadership positions. And the principles are very, very powerful.
So you've gone family, classroom, school leadership, mentoring other leaders. Have there been particular proverbs that have been bedrocks for you in those four different spheres, or themes across them all? What are some of your kind of go-to verses, if you like?
Oh, this is the next 3 hours, basically. It's phenomenal when you get into it. I'll give you two examples which are really powerful, I think. Proverbs 18:13 says, if one gives answer before he hears, he's a fool. Shame on him, actually. And I just wish government would do that. I wish they wouldn't come in with the answer before they'd listened and understood the situation. I wish I'd always, as a teacher, listen to the child before I'd come in with my judgment and what I was going to say. I wish as a teacher I'd started the lesson and understood exactly where the children were at the start, how much they'd understood, where they were before I came in with the next step that they were supposed to be learning. Because I was given the answer before I'd heard. I wish as head teachers, you didn't do anything for a year and just understood the school, understood the teachers, knew where they were coming from before you came in with the answer. Don't come in with the answers straight away. Jesus was asked 183 questions apparently in the Gospels. He answered 3 directly and asked another 307 in reply. So if you want to know, if you want to know how to communicate Christianity to somebody else, well, you've got to ask questions. Don't give the answer before you hear. You need to understand what they think. It's just about, if I'm inspecting, I'm going to a classroom and I just want the teacher to be quiet, just for a minute. So why? So I can talk to the children. Because the only way I'll know what that school is like is if I talk to the children. The teachers can tell me anything. They can be doing anything. They could teach the best lesson they've ever taught in their lives, or the worst lesson they've ever taught in their lives, because I'm there. But if I just need to talk to the children, give me the children, let me talk to them. Then I'll know what they know and understand and can do. I'll know what their attitudes to learning are. And then once I've understood that, then I can start to find out why. And the answer to why is maybe the teaching, maybe the curriculum, maybe a million things, care, guidance and support, maybe the leadership. But I don't give the answer until I've heard. That proverb is so powerful in so many walks of life, in so many situations. And it's a question of applying the principle. So that would be one.
These proverbs have so shaped your life and your own practice. Have you been able to, as a head, in your particular settings, weave them into the practice of your own teachers? I know the principles you can get across, but how explicit can you be, or did you feel you could have been, about tying them to Jesus and the Bible, and or is it more a principle thing?
No, I'm explicit. I'm explicit with the head teachers I work with now. I tell them this is from I love Proverbs, and I'm telling you that love and faithfulness will keep a king safe, and I work on values with them, and I have an exercise that comes up with 4 different values, and when you come out with the values, they will almost certainly come out as either love, caring, compassion, or faithfulness, which they express as professionalism or standards or expectations. And then I show them Proverbs 20:28 in a diagrammatical form, and I say this was 3,000 years old, but they knew what they were talking about, because what you've just expressed 3,000 years later is exactly what they said. That if love and faithfulness keep a king safe. And so if you want to be a good leader, you've got to show care. People have got to feel valued. They've got to feel they matter. They've got to be looked after. But just that is not enough. You have to have faithfulness. You've got to have standards. You've got to have expectation. You've got to have professionalism. You've got to have a goal. And if you put those 2 things together, then your staff will be happy, and they'll be productive, and they'll want to come to work, and they'll actually raise. And the same with children. Children in a class, they need love and faithfulness will keep you safe as a teacher. If they know that you care and they really matter to you, and also you have high expectations for them, that you think, come on, you can do this. I'm not going to accept the rubbish from you. You can do something here. Let's see you do it. Now, you put those 2 things together, love and faithfulness, and it keeps a teacher safe. I could tell you so many stories about how these proverbs apply. They work. It's the same with your children at home. Love and faithfulness with your children.
I was going to ask at that point, Geoff, about for parents, and is there a proverb or two that you love to have in the back pocket as you're sharing wisdom with parents? You're thinking about the family context.
Well, there's Proverbs 17:9. I've seen I use this in school. I'll give you an example from school, but Proverbs 17:9 says, "He who forgives an offence seeks love, but he who repeats a matter alienates." And so forgiveness needs to be, you are forgiven. And in school, when somebody done something really bad and they were sent to me, I had a book, and I gave them a sheet of paper and they had to write down what they'd done. So they had to own the fact that they'd done this thing. And then I would put holes in this piece of paper and put the piece of paper in a clip file, in a file, 2-hole punch file. And they had to prove to me that they'd repented, effectively use a Christian word. So I wasn't going to ring their parents for a week. And if they didn't reoffend, then they showed me that they really were sorry about it, and they could come back to me a week later, and that's what they did. And they would knock on the door and they'd come in, and I would open the folder, tear the sheet out of the folder, hand it to them, and tell them to go over to the shredder. And they go over to the shredder and they put it through the shredder. And behind that sheet of paper which they'd written on was a white piece with nothing written on it. So I'd show them the book and I'd say, "There, is anything written about you there?" And they'd say, "No." I said, "Well, there you are then, you might as well go. Off you go." And they'd go.
That's a lovely picture, isn't it?
I remember once going out of the room after I'd done that, and the boy was still walking down the end of the corridor, and he was fist pumping, going, "Yes, yeah." And I just thought, yeah, that's right, isn't it? That's what forgiveness is. And he knows what forgiveness is, because he who forgives an offence seeks love, and he knew he was loved. And one of the things that, I'm passionate is an overused word, but I'm passionate about being in state education. But one of the things is you can communicate these truths in powerful. You can do it in any sector, obviously, but these children often haven't experienced this kind of forgiveness. They haven't experienced this kind of love often. Although, to be fair, in the schools that I go to, I inspect a lot of schools. There are some cracking schools out there. And what's really interesting is that, when I said to a head teacher this week, they came up with their 4 values, and I said, "You've given me really Christian values there." And I showed them Proverbs 20:28. And I said, "These are really Christian principles you've pulled out." And when you look at the values that schools promote, they are still in a Christian context. They don't realize it, but they are. They're things like kindness and tolerance and honesty, and they really work at those values. So in the best schools, in the good schools, they are wonderful places to be. They're lovely. I don't want to leave them. I mean, I think the teachers would like me to leave sometimes if I'm inspecting, but I love it.
So we're wanting to get Christians talking about education and thinking intentionally about education, homeschool sector, some in independent schools, new schools, and setting them up, Christian schools. And those guests are going to be making the case for those models of education, I suspect. You've just articulated a real deep calling to engage as a Christian within state education. Could you make the case for Christian involvement in the state sector at a time where loads of schools seem to be moving away, at least from the Christian worldview? You've just talked about how rooted a number of the schools that you've inspected are really in Christian principles and values, but there feels like there's been a shift. Could you make a case for Christians in those positions?
Yes, I think I think more than ever, we need Christians to model Jesus in a secular setting, and that modelling is totally in line with what schools are trying to do. There's not a difficulty if I want to love children, if I want to show forgiveness, if I want to be professional, if I want to show Christian character, if I want to build perseverance in children, because perseverance is important, if I want to build character in children, I'm totally in line with what schools are trying to do. If I want to get learners, if I want to get their attitude to learning so that they can fail and keep going, this is where schools are. This is what they're trying to do. I mean, they're sometimes less successful, but that's true of any school, I think. Yes, there are some situations which are challenging, because society is challenging for a Christian nowadays, and there are some things that are not in line with what Orthodox Christianity would support. But I think that's an opportunity to talk about it with your children. That's where you can step in and be a parent, because that's your role as a parent. Because the things that maybe you're struggling with or think are a challenge, they're in society. The issues will be faced by children as they grow up and when they're adults. So to tackle them on the ground where it happens at the time, I think is a powerful thing. And it's not just it's almost as if every generation highlights something else as being the issue in state schools. And I think the biggest issue in state schools when I was growing up was materialism. And I would say that's a bigger issue in some private schools than it is, and what's communicated about possessions and value of human beings in relation to worth. I think that's maybe a more subtle and a bigger challenge than some of the more obvious things that as a parent you can say, yeah, well, yes, you love these people, you understand where they're coming from, but and Jesus loves them, but we think the best way to live is this way. And I think the other one are actually more subtle and get taken on board. So and I'm not pushing one against another here, but I think every one of the different options has strengths and weaknesses. I don't think there's one which is terrible or one which is really good. I think there are advantages and disadvantages to each one. As well, for individual children, some fit better than others. So I would never say for a child, you should go there. You know, take a neurodiverse child, going to a 2,000 strong comprehensive. Well, you could really understand that large classes for a child with some difficulties, that's really not the best place for them. They need to go to, if you can afford it, go to an institution where the classes are small and where they can feel secure and safe and thrive. Equally, you might feel that you're in a Christian school and you get to sixth form, but the subject that you really love, the school hasn't got the capacity to offer that subject because it's got limited resources. So then you go to a state school where there's a sixth form and they've got, studios or whatever it is that you're missing because you haven't got the facilities there.
Would you have any red lines? Would you think that, there is ever a time where you would encourage teachers or parents to consider an alternative because there's just something insurmountable that you think, actually, we've got to that point? I mean, I know that the number of homeschooling families have sort of rocketed up, and there must be a number of factors at play. But there's a number of church-going families who would particularly have chosen that route where perhaps they might not have done, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Do you have any particular red lines on that where you think, actually, that's that's it, really. That's the point where we've got to.
I come back to wisdom, really. I think these are wisdom calls. And the thing about a wisdom call is it's not a moral call. It's you make the call with the best knowledge you've got, with the knowledge of your child, which nobody else has, so that they can thrive and learn in the way you want them to learn, the things that you really feel that they should know and they should understand, and the skills they should have and the attitudes that they should develop. And I mean, I'm not answering that question directly, because I don't think you can. I think it is a wisdom call, and I don't think anybody else can judge your wisdom call.
Picking up on that, the language there of wisdom and of setting, of context. In your professional career, Geoff, you've had a long headship of a primary school in South Wales, 15 years, and then you've also been in settings of schools that have been going through more turbulent times, where you've come in as an interim head. And I just wonder, as you look on those two different contexts there, what has been similar, what's been different as you've sought to apply these principles of Proverbs, of wisdom in leadership, in a setting where it's been more smooth sailing, I suppose, in one sense, and in other settings where it's been choppier waters. How have you approached those different environments, and has it made a difference in how you've led them?
Yes. I think different things are required at different times, but the principles remain the same. So it might be an aspect, say, love and faithfulness keep a king safe. Well, it might be that the staff are totally demoralised going into a school, and that has been something that I've experienced, going into a school that's struggling. Well, therefore, the faithfulness side, the demand on them to mark books or whatever else that you want them to do, you've got to build the morale first. You've got to show you care. So I think you would, but there might be another school you go in where everybody's lovely and happy, but the standard that they're getting from the children aren't right. So you emphasise the faithfulness. They both apply, but you just have to adapt for the different situation. I think you need to prioritise at that point. And a prudent man gives thought to their ways, which is Proverbs 14, verse 8. You have to work out what's the most important thing to do here, to give thought to your ways. And a discerning man keeps wisdom in view, but a fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth, because you've got to focus and work out what is the thing that will have most impact and do most good at this point in time. And don't try and do it all. You can't do it all.
Just to follow on from that then, to what extent do you think Christians, and there'll be a number listening now who are thinking through leadership opportunities perhaps, thinking about that balance of wanting kind of right, godly ambition, but also sometimes that has mixed motives anyway, doesn't it? I think when we look at some of the things that leadership brings, to what extent should Christians be seeking out these opportunities for leadership within education, do you think? You've just expressed that idea of, being useful in the moment that you're in and not trying to do everything. Do you think that we as Christians should be deliberately and intentionally looking for opportunities to move up the chain?
I think that depends on your heart, and what that this is a very difficult thing to describe, but one of the things that's key that's totally linked in Proverbs to wisdom is humility, and those two are entirely connected. And I think it's the motive for leadership. I don't think there's a problem with ambition to have influence, but you just got to watch your heart. I think that's it. You can. Pride is subtle and clever, and Proverbs talks so much about that. It talks about, do you see a man who's wise in his own eyes? there's more hope for a fool than for him. And it's that idea that now I know and now I'm going to tell you all. Well, don't. Stay where you are. Please. But if you do go for it, it's a vocation. But then I think teaching is a vocation. Teaching isn't a job. Teaching is a vocation, and leadership is a gifting, and it's a vocation. And you go in as a servant. Leadership is about serving. It's humility, and any other motive is unwise and unhelpful.
Another question, Geoff, we have as a bit of a standing one is a good book and the good book. It's been a delight today. You've littered Proverbs through our whole conversation. Are there other Proverbs you'd like to share with us, or other verses of Scripture that have shaped you as you think about education? And is there a particular book either you're reading at the moment or you've read in the past that you'd love to share with a wider audience on some of these themes?
Yeah, I mean, the book is obviously Proverbs, and I've probably given you a whole host of them that I just think are fantastic. So just read the book of Proverbs. I love it, and I keep finding new things, and as I think about them they apply, and again so much. And some of them just make me laugh.
How do you read the book of Proverbs, Geoff? Do you take one a day and sit in it, or do you read whole chapters, or how do you do it? Or maybe it's a mix. Probably it's a mix. But how do you tend to approach it?
It's a mix, but I find one that interests me and I sit in it. And I think, okay, what are the principles at play here? And how do they compare to the principles in the world at the moment that I'm experiencing? And sometimes they line up and sometimes they don't. And then, and then I think, okay, how can I apply it then? In this, whatever circumstance it is that I'm thinking about. Where does it apply? And it's so, There's one which says it's like tying a stone in a sling is the giving of honour to a fool. And I just think, oh dear, it's the world. We've just given honour to people who aren't wise. And it's like tying a stone in a sling, and they're just swirling around this swing, and stones are flying everywhere, smashing stuff up. And you just think, yeah, that's what we did. That's what we did. There we go. We gave honour to a guy who wasn't wise. So, there's so many of them. It's just amazing. And the book, I'll get to the point. There's a lovely book called The Final Year by Matt Goodfellow. And I read it last week and it just made me cry. But if you want to know why you should go into state education as a teacher, then that book is a terrific read. It won all sorts of awards, and it's excellent. The Final Year by Matt Goodfellow. Easy read, but terrific.
Well, Geoff, thank you again for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's been a delight. Thank you.
And thank you for enjoying this episode of Reframing Education. We exist to open up conversation about Christ-centred education within the UK. We host fortnightly interviews to inspire and equip educators and parents and leaders as we explore the big question, what is the purpose of education?
So follow, like, share, leave a review. It all helps to grow the conversation. And do have a look at the show notes for other ways to support and connect. Thank you for listening, and until next time, may God fill education with the colour of Christ as we're drawn to the praise and love of our Creator.